I never thought I'd be the kind of person who causes a scene at a bridal shower, but life has a way of backing you into corners you never expected. My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm 42, and just last month, I found myself sitting stiffly at my younger sister Chloe's over-the-top bridal shower at the Lavender Oak, an upscale vineyard restaurant in Santa Rosa, California. The whole event felt like something out of a lifestyle magazine. Custom-printed menus, rose gold flatware, and enough eucalyptus garland to decorate an entire wedding aisle. The private garden terrace was lined with ivory drapes and soft string lights, and a harpist played in the background as guests sipped lavender mimosas. Chloe, glowing in a lace jumpsuit, sat center stage, opening designer gifts while a hired videographer captured every single gasp and giggle. The 40 guests, family, sorority sisters, co-workers, future in-laws, watched her like she was royalty. I smiled and nodded, but with each passing minute, it got harder to keep up the act. Then it happened. Chloe rose from her chair, glass of champagne in hand. "This has been the most magical day," she began, her eyes gleaming. "But you know what the real gift is? The one not even here yet?" She turned toward me with a gleam in her eye. "It's my incredible sister, Rachel. She's giving us her house as our wedding present." The crowd gasped in admiration. A few clapped. My chest tightened, and my pulse rang in my ears as all eyes shifted to me. Some looked impressed, others, pitiful. One of Chloe's bridesmaids leaned toward me. "That's unbelievably kind. So, where are you moving?" Before I could even part my lips, Chloe chimed in, waving a hand like it was nothing. "She doesn't need that much space anyway. Not being married and all. She'll get a cute little place in town. Won't you, Rach?" That was it. The years I spent scrimping, budgeting, and working overtime to buy my own ranch-style home in the hills came rushing back. All the weekends I stayed in, all the sacrifices. I stood up, quietly. I just remembered I left something in my car. I walked away from the terrace, down the gravel path, ignoring the questions being called after me. My hands trembled, but my head was high. I drove straight back to my house, where I went into my office, opened the safe, and pulled out the deed with my name on it. The next move? Let's just say Chloe's fairy tale didn't go the way she planned. I opened the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet and pulled out a manila folder, slipping in the deed, payment records, and a notarized letter I never thought I'd have to show my own sister. I paused at the hallway mirror, took a long breath, and looked myself in the eye. "No more being the doormat," I whispered. "Not today." 20 minutes later, I walked back into that bridal shower at the Lavender Oak, folder in hand and purpose in my step. Chloe and I grew up in a cozy ranch-style home in Petaluma, California, just outside Santa Rosa. It was the kind of neighborhood where families stayed for decades and everyone knew whose bike was left in the driveway. From the very beginning, our roles in the family were unmistakable. Chloe, 3 years younger, was the golden child. With her strawberry blonde curls and dimpled smile, she charmed neighbors, teachers, and our parents effortlessly. Me? I was the quiet achiever. Dark hair, glasses, and always with a book in hand, I was the older one, not Rachel. Just older. Our parents never outright said Chloe was their favorite, but they didn't need to. I still remember the week of my 8th grade science fair. I had spent months building a detailed model of a solar-powered irrigation system. The night before the fair, Chloe knocked it off the table. She said it was an accident. I believed her. At first. Our parents told me, "Don't be dramatic, Rachel." She didn't mean to. No consequence. No apology. I stayed up all night salvaging what I could. I placed third. I'd been projected to win. That moment defined the next 2 decades. By 14, I had learned the pattern. Chloe took, I forgave. She borrowed, I replaced. When I turned 16, my grandmother gave me a delicate silver bracelet. A week later, Chloe wore it to a barbecue. When I said something, Mom smiled and said, "It looks lovely on her, Rachel. Can't you share?" So I kept working. I studied hard. I worked the front desk at the town library, then made lattes at a cafe off Main Street. I saved every dollar, bought thrift clothes, packed every lunch. Meanwhile, Chloe breezed through high school as the star of everything. Cheer captain, prom queen, always in something new. Her Sweet 16, a catered backyard bash with a live DJ, mine, cupcakes and a pizza in the living room. When college acceptance letters came, I had options. I chose Sonoma State for its scholarship program. I still worked 20 hours a week. Chloe went to a private school in Manhattan, joined a top sorority, then dropped out 2 years later. Too restrictive, she said. The debt? Covered. No questions asked. And now? She thought she could take my house? She had no idea what was coming next. I graduated with a degree in finance from Sonoma State and landed an entry-level role at a mid-sized investment firm in Santa Rosa. For the next 6 years, I lived with rotating roommates in small rentals, maintaining the same frugal habits I developed in college. I packed lunches daily, treated myself to one dinner out a month, and tracked every single dollar in an Excel spreadsheet color-coded by category. Meanwhile, Chloe flitted from one half-hearted career to another. First, she launched a skincare line on Etsy that folded in less than a year. Then she became a lifestyle photographer, abandoning her DSLR camera after a few photo shoots. Her next idea? An interior styling gig that mostly involved rearranging our parents' living room, at their expense. Each time she failed, our parents stepped in with more money and excuses. Chloe just hasn't found her passion yet, they'd say. I nodded, swallowed my frustration, and kept building my future alone. By the time I was 29, I'd earned a promotion to senior financial analyst and had finally saved enough for a down payment. The housing market was tight, and I lost out on several offers before I found it. A 3-bedroom craftsman tucked into a quiet neighborhood with good schools and old-growth trees lining the block. It had original hardwood floors, charming built-ins, and a sprawling oak in the backyard. The minute I stepped inside, I knew it was mine. I pushed my budget to the brink and submitted my offer that very afternoon. When the call came that it had been accepted, I cried, for the first time in years. That moment, clutching those keys, was the proudest of my life. I invited my family over for a small celebration. Chloe arrived fashionably late, as always, 3 hours behind everyone else, breezing in with a dramatic toss of her hair. "It's cute," she said with a wrinkled nose. "But don't you think it's kind of far from downtown?" She spent the evening offering backhanded compliments, but I was too proud to let her ruin it. A few weeks later, she crashed at my place after a late night out in Santa Rosa. She left wet towels on my floors, spilled rosé on my new couch, and laughed when I asked her to be more mindful. "Don't be so uptight, Rach," she grinned, stretching out. "You'll probably move to the suburbs one day anyway. I might end up with this place when you do." I laughed, assuming it was just Chloe being Chloe. I had no idea that she'd twist that offhand comment into a full-blown claim. It all started to unravel when she met Ethan Marshall, a polished real estate heir from Napa Valley, with the smile of a man who'd never heard the word no. Chloe called me just after midnight, breathless and giddy. "He's the one, Rach," she squealed. They'd just returned from their first date. 6 months later, Ethan Marshall proposed during a Napa Valley sunset cruise on his family's private boat, with a hidden photographer in tow to capture it all for Instagram. Each time Chloe told the story, it grew more theatrical, complete with exaggerated dialogue and dramatic flourishes. I was genuinely happy for her, at first. Despite our rocky history, I wanted her to find happiness, and Ethan seemed solid. Old money, polished, and absolutely smitten with her. Maybe this marriage would finally ground Chloe, give her the structure she'd never had. That hope dimmed the moment she asked me to be her maid of honor, then promptly told me the bridesmaid dresses would be $425, not including custom shoes, a mandatory hair and makeup session, or the bachelorette trip to Palm Springs. When I gently suggested we consider more affordable options, she rolled her eyes. "It's my wedding, Rachel. Don't be so cheap. It's not like you have anything else going on. You already have a house." That comment stuck with me, sharper than she intended. Then she asked to use my backyard for engagement photos. "It's perfect. Way better than paying for a venue," she said, smiling sweetly. I agreed, happy to help. But when she and Ethan arrived with the photographer, things quickly got out of hand. They started dragging my patio furniture around, moving planters, even shifting my grandmother's antique bench. When I objected, Chloe pulled me aside. "Why are you being so dramatic? These photos are for our forever album." 4 hours later, my flower beds were trampled. A ceramic pot I hand-painted was shattered, and I ended up playing hostess, fetching water and snacks like a hired assistant. No one helped clean up, no apology, no thank you. A week later, Chloe floated the idea of hosting her bridal shower at my house. "It's way classier than Mom and Dad's place," she said, like she was doing me a favor. I hesitated. 50 guests? In my home? "I'm not sure the space works for that many," I said. Chloe frowned. "It's such a waste with just you living here. All that space for one person." I stood firm. We booked a vineyard restaurant instead, but things escalated even more when she and Ethan came over for dinner. As I finished plating pasta in the kitchen, I overheard Ethan saying, "We could knock out that wall between the dining room and the living room. Really open it up." When I walked in, they looked up guiltily. "Just throwing out ideas," Chloe said with a shrug. "This place has so much potential." Later that night, as they were heading out the door, Chloe tossed a casual comment over her shoulder. "By the way, we might crash here after the honeymoon for a bit, just until we find our first place." She laughed lightly. "Ethan's lease ends the same week we get back, and we don't want to rush finding the one, you know?" At first, I thought she meant a few days, but over the next few weeks, a bit morphed into a few weeks, then into however long it takes to find the perfect home. I tried not to overthink it, until Chloe started referring to the guest room as our room, whenever we talked about their post-honeymoon stay. Then one Saturday morning, I walked downstairs and found Ethan standing in my living room with a tape measure, stretching it across the window frames. He looked up and smiled. "Just checking dimensions. Trying to see what kind of curtains would work in here. Chloe thinks yours are too heavy for the space." I found Chloe in my kitchen, pulling dishes out of my upper cabinets. "You've got so much room you're not using," she said, rearranging mugs and bowls. "We could fit all our wedding china in here, no problem." That was my breaking point. "Chloe," I said slowly, "I'm starting to get the impression that you and Ethan are planning to move in, not just stay for a couple weeks." "That's not going to work for me." Her eyes filled with tears instantly. Classic Chloe. "I just thought you'd want to help us start our marriage on the right foot," she said, voice trembling. "It's not easy for couples like us right now. Housing prices are insane." When I reminded her I'd managed to buy my house alone, after years of hard work and sacrifice, she didn't miss a beat. "But you're just one person. We're going to be a family. Don't you want your future nieces and nephews growing up in a safe, beautiful place like this?" I stood firm. She sighed, then offered what sounded like a sincere apology. "I'm sorry if we pushed too hard. It's been a lot lately. I got carried away with everything. Of course we'll find our own place." I wanted to believe her. Later that week, I grabbed coffee with my best friend Jenny and mentioned everything. She frowned. "Rachel, it really sounds like Chloe thinks she's going to live there. Like, long term. Has she ever actually said they're planning to get their own place?" I paused. "Well, she's been vague." Jenny gave me a look. "You know how she is." I laughed it off, insisting, "There's no way she'd expect me to give up my house. She knows what it took for me to get here." But deep down, I wasn't so sure anymore. While some of my college classmates were jetting off to Europe or signing leases for sleek apartments in San Francisco or downtown Napa, I was unpacking boxes in a rundown 3-bedroom unit in Rohnert Park, sharing the space with 2 other women. I took the smallest room, the one with a window that stared straight at a brick wall, just to save $75 a month on rent. My first job, as a junior financial analyst at a mid-tier investment firm in Santa Rosa, paid $48,000 a year. It wasn't terrible for an entry-level role, but it was hardly enough to cover student loans, rent, bills, and still build up savings, especially in Northern California. So I did what I've always done. I planned. I created a master spreadsheet that tracked every penny earned and spent. It was color-coded by category and even included a formula to calculate how each deposit nudged me closer to my dream, home ownership. My budget was intense. $40 a week for groceries, which meant I lived on rice, lentils, frozen vegetables, and whatever produce was on sale. $60 a month for entertainment, usually a dinner and a matinee. $30 for clothing, which kept me at thrift stores or hunting online clearance sales. I meal prepped religiously every Sunday, stacking labeled containers of soup and salad in the fridge. While coworkers ordered poke bowls or sushi, I sat at my desk with homemade lentil stew and politely declined every group lunch outing. After a year, I saw the hard truth. My savings weren't keeping up with the surging housing market. So I picked up a weekend barista shift at a small cafe near my apartment. Every Saturday and Sunday, I opened shop at 5:30 a.m., pouring lattes until 1 p.m. Gone were sleep-ins or lazy brunches. My social life? Non-existent. But that extra $600 a month after taxes? It all went into my house fund. At year 2, I earned a modest promotion, and with it, a $5,000 salary bump. Did I upgrade my lifestyle? I adjusted my spreadsheet and raised my savings goal. That same year, my college friends planned our dream trip to Italy. 2 weeks, $3,200 per person. I stared at the group chat for days before politely backing out. That money belonged in my future, not in selfies in front of the Colosseum. By year 4, I had moved into a cleaner, quieter 2-bedroom with only one roommate. Rent was $200 more, but I made it work by picking up extra holiday shifts at the cafe and doing part-time bookkeeping for a local boutique. I was still driving the same used 2007 Honda Civic, cutting my own hair in the bathroom mirror, and sleeping on the mattress I'd bought my sophomore year. Then came year 5, the moment that changed everything. I got promoted to senior financial analyst. I was finally ready to start house hunting. My salary jumped to $85,000, and for the first time, my house fund was growing fast enough that homeownership felt real, no longer some distant dream. I met with a mortgage broker in Santa Rosa, who pre-approved me for a loan of up to $400,000. In Northern California's market, it wasn't much, but it was a start. Every weekend, I toured open houses. Often, I'd come straight from the coffee shop, still smelling faintly of espresso, changing into clean jeans and a blazer in my car before shaking hands with realtors. Over the next 8 months, I toured more than 40 properties, putting in offers on 3. Each time, I was outbid. Once, by a cash buyer, another by someone waiving all contingencies. It was a draining emotional cycle. The excitement of discovery, the anxiety of waiting, and the gut punch when my realtor called with bad news. Then, one rainy Sunday, when I almost stayed home, I found her. A weathered but charming 1920s craftsman tucked away on a quiet street in Petaluma. Asking price, $425,000. Way above my comfort zone. But the house had character. Original hardwood floors hidden beneath worn carpeting, archways, vintage doorknobs, and a backyard shaded by a giant oak. The bones were solid. It needed work, but it had soul. That evening, I submitted a full-price offer. I drained my emergency fund to bump my down payment from 15% to 20%, avoiding PMI and giving my bid a competitive edge. 2 days later, I was in the break room at work when my phone rang. "They accepted your offer," my realtor said. I ducked into the bathroom and cried, happy tears that came from 6 years of sacrifice finally paying off. The inspection uncovered only small issues, and closing went surprisingly smoothly. On closing day, I signed my name so many times my hand cramped, then handed over a certified check that represented years of skipped dinners, second jobs, and sacrifice. That first night in my empty house, I sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor, eating takeout straight from the container and feeling a sense of peace and pride I had never felt before. My mortgage took nearly 40% of my income, more than ideal, but I made it work. I quit the cafe job to focus on my main career and started fixing up the place myself. I painted every room. I learned to refinish the floors from YouTube. I replaced a leaky sink by watching plumbing tutorials. Every improvement, every hour of labor, it all meant something. Furniture came slowly, a basic bed frame, a secondhand dining table I refinished, a clearance sofa. Each item was earned, considered, and carefully budgeted. The contrast with Chloe couldn't have been clearer. While I worked 60-hour weeks and pinched every penny, she filled her Instagram with brunch selfies, designer bags, and weekend spa getaways. When Chloe maxed out her credit cards the first time, my parents paid them off, calling it an early birthday present. When she did it again 18 months later, they covered it without flinching. She's still finding her financial footing, my dad said. When Chloe wrecked her first car, a graduation gift that was far nicer than anything I'd ever owned, they replaced it with an even newer model. No questions asked, no consequences. Her closet was filled with clothes that still had tags on them. Designer shoes worn once, handbags that cost more than my monthly student loan payments. On the nights I lay awake worrying about my mortgage or whether the roof would make it through the next rainy season, I'd sometimes question myself. Was I being too rigid? Too frugal? Was Chloe actually the normal one, enjoying her youth while I hoarded every penny like some kind of financial monk? But then, I'd walk through my home. I'd run my hand along the oak banister I had sanded and stained myself, breathe in the scent of lavender from the garden I had planted from seed, and I'd remember, I earned this. Every inch of it. No one gave it to me, and I sure as hell wasn't about to give it away now. 6 months before Chloe's wedding, I came home on a random Tuesday evening and saw her silver BMW parked in my driveway. Next to it was a sleek black Audi I didn't recognize. Annoyed by the unannounced visit, I stepped inside my own home and froze. There stood Chloe, Ethan, and a sharply dressed woman with a leather binder, fabric swatches, and a tape measure in hand. "Rachel," Chloe said brightly, clearly startled. "You're home early." She gestured toward the stranger. "This is Vanessa, our interior designer. We were just tossing around some renovation ideas for when we move in." "Move in?" I stood frozen, still gripping my laptop bag and Tupperware from lunch. "I'm sorry? What?" Vanessa shifted awkwardly. Ethan glanced away. Chloe gave her signature nervous laugh, the one she used when caught pushing a lie a little too far. "Didn't Mom and Dad talk to you about this? We've all been discussing it for weeks." Ethan, at least, had the grace to look mildly ashamed. "We thought you were on board," he said, eyes not quite meeting mine. Chloe pressed on, as if it was already settled. "It makes perfect sense. This neighborhood is amazing for raising a family. And you're just one person in this whole house. Wouldn't you rather be downtown? Isn't that what single-career women want? Restaurants, nightlife, yoga studios?" Her tone was so casually dismissive, it knocked the wind out of me. She wasn't just assuming she could live here, she was planning the renovations. "I think I should give you two some privacy," Vanessa said carefully, closing her binder of fabric samples. "Chloe, we can reschedule once things are more settled." She gave a polite smile, then made a swift exit. The second the door closed, I turned to Chloe and Ethan. "I never agreed to give you my house. I don't know where you got that idea, but it's not happening." Chloe's eyes instantly brimmed with tears, her go-to tactic, while Ethan looked caught off guard. "But your parents said," he began, before Chloe shot him a look that made him snap his mouth shut. They left soon after, Chloe muttering that I was being completely unreasonable and that "we'll talk when you've calmed down." 3 days later, I got a text from my mom. "Come for dinner. We need to discuss some family matters." I had a sinking feeling even before I pulled into their driveway in Petaluma. Sure enough, Chloe and Ethan were already seated at the dining room table alongside my parents. The table was set for 5, and the food was suspiciously thoughtful: roast chicken, rosemary potatoes, steamed asparagus. All my favorites. A peace offering disguised as a meal. We made awkward small talk until the main course, when my dad finally cleared his throat. "Rachel, we wanted to talk to you about your house," he said, using that formal tone he usually reserved for car negotiations or tax discussions. "Family helps family, and that house, it's really too big for one person." My mom chimed in, nodding. "Chloe and Ethan are starting a new chapter, and housing is so expensive for young couples these days." I put my fork down, my appetite gone. "I saved for years to buy that house. I pay for it every month. It's mine." "No one's saying it isn't," my dad replied. in the exact voice that told me that's exactly what they were saying. "But it's all family in the end," he continued, "and they need a home in a safe neighborhood to start their family." I blinked. "And what about me? Where am I supposed to go?" My mom reached across the table to pat my hand. "You could stay in the guest room here, just until you find a new place. There are plenty of nice apartments near your office." The conversation spiraled from there. Chloe dabbed at imaginary tears, calling me selfish. Ethan sat in silence, occasionally nodding when my parents made a point. My dad told me I was being overly emotional over a material asset, like it was a childhood toy I refused to share. Then, Mom delivered the final blow. "If you had a husband or children who needed the space, this would be different." I stood, heart pounding. "Thanks for dinner." And I walked out. No dessert, no goodbyes, just the sound of my mom calling after me, begging me to be reasonable. In my car, hands trembling, I called Jenny. I was so upset I had to pull over just 5 minutes from my parents' house. I couldn't even trust myself to stay in my lane. "They want me to give Chloe my house," I said, still struggling to process the words out loud. "As a wedding gift?" There was a stunned silence. Then Jenny's voice, sharp and furious. "Your house? The one you spent 6 years saving for? The one you've been renovating every weekend like it's your full-time job?" Her outrage gave me the validation I didn't even realize I needed. "That's insane. Please tell me you told them no." "Of course I did," I said. "But somehow, I'm the selfish one for not handing over everything I've worked for." In the days that followed, things only got more surreal. A mutual friend messaged me. "So proud of you. That's such an incredible gift. Chloe told us everything. You're amazing." I scrolled in disbelief through Instagram stories from Chloe's bridal party, posts about how fun it would be to help her redecorate her new house. One had a photo of my backyard with the caption, "Future nursery vibes." Chloe responded with heart emojis, and "can't wait." I found posts discussing which room would become the nursery and how my home office would be perfect as Ethan's man cave. Then came the phone calls. Relatives I barely spoke to calling to praise my generosity. One aunt even offered me her son's old futon, "until you get settled." It was like the entire extended family had been handed a script. And I wasn't just out of the loop. I was cast in a role I hadn't agreed to play. At night, I lay awake asking myself if maybe I was being selfish. I was just one person in a 3-bedroom house. Chloe and Ethan were planning to start a family. Wasn't it the kind thing to do? But then I'd remember the nights I closed the cafe at 1 a.m. after working all week. The years I packed lunch and walked past coworkers laughing in restaurants. The weekend Chloe went to Vegas while I sanded my floors. This house wasn't a gift. It was earned, inch by inch, hour by hour. In the week leading up to the bridal shower, I tried again and again to talk to Chloe. Each time I got the same excuse. "I'm swamped with wedding stuff." Or, "Let's talk after the shower, Rach." It's chaos right now. I began to realize she wasn't just avoiding me, she was counting on public pressure to force me to fold. But she didn't understand that years of being pushed aside had built something inside me. By the time the bridal shower arrived, I wasn't just ready, I was done being quiet. What I wasn't ready for was the public spectacle Chloe had planned. If this story has you on edge like it did me, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. Because what Chloe said at the bridal shower left the entire room speechless and forced me to take a stand I never thought I would. Gold calligraphy place cards marked each seat at the 4 elegantly dressed tables. A champagne fountain bubbled softly in the corner, while a professional photographer moved around the room, snapping candids of guests in pastel dresses and pressed linen suits. The gift table was already overflowing, piled high with parcels wrapped in blush pink, ivory, and gold foil, many bearing the distinct logos of luxury boutiques and high-end department stores. I spotted faces from Chloe's high school cheer squad, her sorority sisters from New York, her yoga crew, and of course, members of Ethan's family. They all had that air of quiet confidence, polished, practiced, and inherited through generations of financial security. I took my seat at the family table near the front, flanked by my mother, 2 of my aunts, and Ethan's mother, Vivian. A refined woman in her 50s, wearing a pale blue Chanel suit that probably cost more than 3 of my mortgage payments. Chloe floated effortlessly around the room in a white lace midi dress, her diamond ring glittering as she waved and laughed dramatically, basking in attention. I nursed my champagne slowly, already feeling a dull ache forming behind my temples. As the 3-course lunch progressed, I couldn't help but overhear bits of conversation from Chloe's bridesmaids at the next table. "I can't wait to see what she does with the master bedroom," one gushed. "That bay window's perfect for a makeup station." Another added, "Should I stay in the blue room or the one with the reading nook when I visit?" They weren't talking about some hypothetical future house. They were describing my house, my bedroom, my reading nook. I clenched my fork until my knuckles turned white, focusing on my breathing to stay composed. Vivian leaned over her untouched salad toward me. "Chloe tells me you work in finance," she said with a practiced smile. "How fascinating." She made it sound like I repaired copy machines for a living. "It must be so gratifying to give your sister such a meaningful gift as a start to her new life," she added warmly. I forced a tight smile and mumbled something vague, praying for a distraction, but she wasn't finished. "And where will you be moving afterward? Ethan mentioned you might look for a cozy apartment near your office. That'll be lovely, close to cafes and shopping." My stomach turned. The assumption that I'd just leave, as if I didn't exist beyond being Chloe's stepping stone. Then came the gift opening. Chloe took center stage in an ornate chair, her maid of honor, Kelly, beside her recording each gift in a monogram journal. Crystal vases, silver platters, high-end kitchen gadgets. Each gift prompted over-the-top gasps and claps. I watched, frozen, heart-pounding. I knew what was coming. Then Vivian rose and handed Chloe an envelope. A $10,000 check for their honeymoon in the Maldives. And then, with the room watching, Chloe stood and made her big announcement. The applause from Vivian's honeymoon gift was just fading when Chloe stood up, champagne flute in hand, a glimmer in her eye that immediately put me on edge. "I just want to thank everyone for these amazing gifts," she began, her voice ringing out over the clinking of cutlery and soft background music. "But the best gift isn't even on the table today." She paused dramatically, turning toward me. "It's from my incredible sister, Rachel. She's giving us her house as our wedding present." The room erupted in applause and murmurs of admiration. I sat frozen, my champagne glass nearly slipping through my fingers. Every head turned toward me, some faces glowing with awe, others with barely concealed envy. My throat tightened. I forced what I hoped was a smile, but I could feel it trembling at the corners. One of Chloe's sorority friends gasped, "Oh my God, that's amazing! Where are you going to live, Rachel?" Before I could say a word, Chloe cut in with a breezy laugh. "Oh, she'll find an apartment or something," she said, waving her hand as if brushing away a fly. "It's not like she needs all that space, being single and all." Something inside me cracked. 3 years of sacrificing nights out, working weekends, counting pennies, renovating every inch of that house, all of it rushed through my mind like a tidal wave. I stood slowly. "Excuse me," I said, voice even. "I forgot something in my car. I'll be right back." I walked out of that vineyard dining room with my chin high, even though my hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped my keys. The 15-minute drive home was a blur, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, heart pounding with words I had never dared to say out loud. But this time, I would. I pulled into my driveway and went straight to my home office, unlocking the cabinet where I kept all my important documents. I grabbed a manila folder and filled it with everything. My mortgage statements, property tax bills, home insurance documents, and most importantly, the deed, bearing only my name. As a final touch, I pulled up old text messages from Chloe, several of which included lines like, "Can I come by your house this weekend?" I stood in the middle of my living room, taking in the walls I had painted, the shelves I had refinished, the nook where I drank coffee every morning. This was mine, every inch of it, and no one, especially not Chloe, was going to take that from me. I drove back, the folder secure on the passenger seat. As I entered the room, Chloe's face faltered for just a second. She saw the folder and knew. I waited at the edge, silent, while she opened her final gifts. When Kelly finished recording the last card, I stepped forward. It was time. I walked to the center of the room, where Chloe sat surrounded by lavish gifts and the approving smiles of friends and family. My voice rang out, clear and steadier than I expected. "Excuse me. I think there's been a misunderstanding that I need to address." Every head turned toward me. The room quieted instantly. The manila folder in my hands felt heavier than ever, but my resolve was solid. I could feel the tension thicken. Champagne flutes paused mid-air, conversation evaporated, and Chloe's smile froze like a paused screen. "I want to clarify something," I said, locking eyes with the crowd. "Despite what's been announced, I have never agreed to give my house to Chloe and Ethan as a wedding gift." Chloe's face flushed crimson. She stood halfway. "Rachel, you're embarrassing yourself," she snapped under her breath, her voice sharp enough for nearby guests to hear. "Can we please talk about this later?" I ignored her completely. "This confusion seems to have taken on a life of its own," I continued, my voice carrying through the stunned silence. "So I believe it's best to be transparent with everyone." I opened the folder with deliberate care. The gentle rustle of paper echoed louder than expected in the tense room. "This," I said, holding up a printed page, "is my mortgage statement, showing that I am solely responsible for the payments on my home." I held it high enough that the bank's letterhead and my name were plainly visible. "These are my property tax records," I added, laying them on the nearest table beside the mountain of wedding gifts. "Also in my name alone." Then, the final page. "This is the deed to my house. As you can see, only my name is listed. No co-owners, no transfers, just me." Chloe had gone pale. Her freckles stood out like tiny bruises against her skin. Ethan, standing near the back of the room, looked stunned, confusion giving way to something closer to dismay. I reached into my bag for my phone and pulled up our text history. I also have messages, several, where Chloe refers to it as my house. For example, 3 months ago, "Can we come over to your new place this weekend?" Last month, "Can we use your backyard for some wedding planning?" I looked directly at Chloe as I read. She squirmed in her chair, eyes darting for a way out that didn't exist. "At no point," I said firmly, "did I offer my home as a gift, suggest I would move out, or agree to let anyone live there permanently." From the corner of my eye, I saw Vivian's perfectly arched brows lift in shock. My own mother sat frozen, hand over her chest, not in defense of me, but in shame, directed at me. A wave of whispers rippled through the room as the guests processed what had just happened. "Chloe said her parents were giving her the house," I heard one of her bridesmaids whisper to another, both of them wide-eyed and clutching their champagne glasses. Chloe finally found her voice, though it wavered under the weight of a crumbling performance. "Rachel is just confused," she said loudly, forcing a laugh. "We've been discussing this arrangement for months. Mom and Dad agreed it was the perfect solution for everyone." "That's not true," I replied evenly, my voice calm and steady. "I've told both you and our parents, repeatedly, that I have no intention of giving up my home. The fact that you've been telling people otherwise is deeply concerning." Ethan stepped forward, his confident exterior faltering. Confusion and something sharper, betrayal maybe, darkened his features. "Chloe, is this true?" he asked, tone tight. "You told me your parents were gifting us the house, that Rachel was completely on board." The look she shot him was desperate, pleading, but it was too late. The carefully constructed fantasy Chloe had spun was unraveling in front of an audience that had once cheered her on. And now, they were watching the show collapse. I gathered my documents, tucking them back into the folder, still composed, though my pulse was thudding in my ears. "I worked for years to afford that house," I said to the room. "I never offered it as a gift. And I will not be pressured into giving away something I earned with sacrifice and hard work." The room fell utterly silent. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. Real ones this time. Not the practiced performative tears she'd used all her life to get what she wanted. Ethan stood off to the side now. No longer the proud fiancé, but a man quietly reassessing everything. The photographer had long since lowered her camera, sensing these were not the moments anyone would want to frame. "I think that's all I needed to clarify," I said quietly. "Congratulations on your upcoming wedding." With that, I turned and walked toward the exit, head high, clutching the folder under my arm like armor. Dozens of eyes followed me, but I didn't flinch. Behind me, murmurs turned to chatter. Then I heard it, Chloe's sob, and Ethan's clipped voice. "We need to talk. Now." As I reached the front of the venue, I heard Vivian's sharp, stunned voice. "What else haven't you been truthful about, Chloe?" I stepped into the hallway and finally exhaled. The confrontation was over. My hands trembled, but my spine was straight. No matter what came next, I had defended what was mine. But before I reached the elevator, the door burst open behind me. "How could you?" Chloe screamed, mascara streaking down her cheeks, her voice cracking through the elegant silence of the corridor. "You've ruined everything!" Chloe cried, her voice echoing off the sleek hallway walls. A moment later, Ethan stormed out of the private dining room, his face taut with barely restrained fury. He didn't even glance at me as he rounded on her. "You told me your parents were giving us the house," he said sharply. "You said it was all arranged." Their private meltdown was becoming very public. Diners in the nearby courtyard had started turning their heads, phones halfway to their mouths, sipping slowly as if they'd stumbled into live theater. Chloe grabbed my arm as I tried to step away. "Fix this, Rachel," she hissed through clenched teeth. "Go back in there and tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you changed your mind about the gift." I removed her hand from my arm, gently but firmly. "I can't fix a lie you told," I said. "I never agreed to give you my house. And you've known that from the beginning." Ethan raked a hand through his styled hair, disrupting it in a way that made him look, for the first time, like a real person instead of a magazine ad. "I can't believe this," he muttered. "What else have you made up?" I started to walk toward the exit, wanting no part of their imploding engagement, when the door behind us banged open again. My mother. Her face was a storm cloud of disapproval, every step punctuated by the sharp click of her heels on the pavement. "Rachel Elizabeth Monroe," she snapped, using my full name like she had when I was 8, and tracked mud on the carpet. "How dare you humiliate your sister like this, on today of all days?" She followed me as I continued toward the parking lot. "I didn't humiliate Chloe," I said calmly, fishing for my keys. "She did that all on her own, by lying to everyone, including Ethan." She grabbed my wrist, forcing me to turn. "Why are you being so selfish? It's just a house. Chloe needs it. She's starting a family." That sentence hit harder than I expected. "It's not just a house, Mom," I said, my voice low. "It's my home. It's years of sacrifice. It's security. And why is it always me who has to give something up for Chloe?" My mother blinked, genuinely confused. "Well, you're not married," she said slowly. "You don't need that much space. Chloe and Ethan will have children. They'll need good schools, a safe neighborhood." And there it was, laid bare. In their eyes, my life meant less. My future didn't require space or comfort. I was just the placeholder for someone else's dreams. "I'm going home now," I said quietly, unlocking my car door. My home, the one I saved for, worked for, and owned, and would continue to own. I returned briefly to the vineyard venue to retrieve my purse, which I'd left behind in the chaos. The room that had once buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses was now quiet, with guests making polite excuses to leave early. The festive glow had vanished, replaced by hushed conversations and awkward glances. A few of the older relatives shot me disapproving looks, siding with Chloe without hesitation. But others, especially some of Ethan's family and a handful of Chloe's friends who actually knew me, offered subtle nods or sympathetic smiles. Chloe and Ethan had left separately. He refused to ride with her. My parents disappeared soon after, without a word to me. I thought I'd be alone in the aftermath, until Jenny and my cousin Claire appeared as I grabbed my purse. "Let's get a drink," Jenny said, sliding her arm through mine. You definitely need one. We walked a couple blocks to a quiet wine bar. As soon as we sat down and the first sip of Syrah hit my lips, my composure began to crumble. Did I overreact? I asked them, twisting my cloth napkin in my lap. Should I have handled it differently? Claire didn't hesitate. Are you kidding? Chloe stood up in front of 50 people and announced that you gave her your house. Without asking you. You had every right to speak up. Jenny nodded. You didn't make a scene. You told the truth. She lied. And your parents let her. Their support loosened the anxiety tangled in my chest. Later that night, I returned home. I walked slowly through each room, feeling a new sense of ownership, not just of the property, but of my boundaries, my independence, my worth. This wasn't just a house. It was my life, brick by brick. The quiet was broken by a vibrating buzz from my phone, which I'd silenced hours earlier. 27 texts, 14 missed calls, 9 voicemails. My father's message, call us immediately. You need to fix this mess. My mother's voicemail was worse. Her voice trembled. Chloe's been crying all night. I've never seen her like this. How could you do this to your only sister? Chloe's was predictably dramatic. You've ruined everything. Ethan's threatening to cancel the wedding. I hope you're happy. Then, one from Ethan. Rachel, I want to apologize. Chloe led me to believe this was settled. We need to talk, once things cool down. I turned off my phone. I'd had enough. Jenny showed up an hour later with Thai takeout and a bottle of Pinot. We sat on my porch swing, watching the sky fade from amber to navy. You did the right thing, she said quietly, every time I doubted it. You are allowed to have boundaries, even with family, especially with family. That night, I lay in the master bedroom, the same room Chloe had casually claimed in her fantasy renovation plans. But for the first time, instead of feeling guilt or doubt, I felt something else. Clarity. A quiet, steady sense of strength. For once, I hadn't been the one to step aside. I hadn't made myself small to keep the peace or handed over what was mine just because it was easier. It was terrifying and strangely empowering. The next morning, my phone screen glowed with 27 missed calls and a flood of unread messages. I didn't open a single one. Not yet. I needed time to sort through my own emotions before being dragged back into my family's chaos. For the next week, I kept my distance. I went to work, I cooked my own meals, I repotted a basil plant on my porch, and little by little, I began to breathe again. My boss noticed I was a little distracted. After I offered a short, vague explanation about family stress, she simply nodded and said, "Take the time you need. Families are complicated." I was grateful for the grace. But on Thursday, everything escalated. I was heating up lunch in the break room when my parents showed up, unannounced. My stomach dropped when I saw them walk through the office doors. "This has gone on long enough," my father said quietly but firmly, backing me into a corner near the fridge. "You need to apologize to Chloe, before the wedding." My mother dabbed her eyes. "She's heartbroken, Rachel. This was supposed to be the happiest time of her life. Now there's this shadow over everything." I didn't respond right away. The silence must have unnerved them. "If you can't do this one thing for your sister," my father added, "then don't bother coming to the wedding. I mean it." They left me standing there, speechless and humiliated, while coworkers quietly pretended not to listen. Moments later, a text pinged from my boss. "Take the afternoon." That looked rough. I did. I wandered the Santa Rosa botanical gardens, soaking in the quiet and trying to untangle the mess of guilt, anger, and a strange, growing resolve. That evening, just after I got home from work, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Chloe, eyes red, jaw tight, and Ethan, hovering behind her in the golden dusk. "We need to talk," Chloe announced, pushing past me like she owned the place. Ethan gave me an apologetic smile before stepping in. "Can I get you something to drink?" I asked automatically, clinging to civility. "This isn't a social call," Chloe snapped, pacing my living room like it was still hers. But this time, I didn't feel cornered. She could pace all she wanted. This was still my home. "Ethan and I have been talking," Chloe began, folding her arms across her chest like she was steeling herself for a battle. "And we need to clear the air before the wedding. Ethan cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably on the edge of my armchair. First, I want to apologize for the misunderstanding. Chloe told me your parents were giving us the house as a wedding gift. She said you were completely on board. Chloe shot him a sharp look, her lips tightening. I might have exaggerated some of those conversations, she admitted, though her tone made it sound like she was doing me a favor by confessing. But I just knew, once we were married, you'd want to help us get started. That's what family does. I took a breath, slow and measured. I wouldn't be baited. Chloe, I said, I've told you multiple times that I'm not giving you my house. I've been clear from the beginning. If you built up expectations based on something I never said, that's on you, not me. Her eyes shimmered with fresh tears, the performative kind this time. You've always been so selfish, Rachel, she snapped. You have this huge house all to yourself while Ethan and I are struggling to find a place we can afford in a decent neighborhood. Ethan shifted again. Well, to be fair, we're not exactly struggling. My parents offered to help with the down payment. Chloe glared at him, cutting him off with a look sharp enough to draw blood. The point is, she said quickly, this house would be perfect for us. Think about your future nieces and nephews growing up here. I am thinking about the future, I said calmly. Mine. In the home I worked incredibly hard to afford. I met her gaze evenly. I made sacrifices to buy this place. Sacrifices you've never had to make, because Mom and Dad always caught you when you fell. Chloe's face hardened. So, you're punishing me because they helped me? That's not my fault. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm just not giving you my house. There's a difference. Ethan, trying to play peacemaker, chimed in. What if we compromised? Maybe we could stay here, just temporarily. Share the space until we find our own place? I shook my head. That's not going to work. I'm not interested in being your roommate or having my home turned into a layover until you find something better. Chloe's cheeks flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. You're choosing a house over your family. If you choose to see it that way, I replied evenly, that's your choice. But I won't be guilted into giving up what I've worked so hard for. Ethan stood up, quiet but firm. Come on, Chloe. That's enough, I said, my voice steady and clear. For my entire life, I've been expected to give way for Chloe, to share my toys, to stay quiet when she got the spotlight, to clean up her messes while everyone looked the other way. I was the responsible one, the one who saved, planned, and sacrificed. I gave up vacations, dinners out, and weekends for years to afford my home. And now I'm the villain for wanting to keep it? The room fell silent, but I didn't stop. I've been patient. I've been generous. I've been the bigger person more times than I can count. But this is where I draw the line. My home isn't a wedding favor. It isn't some accessory to your happily ever after. It's the result of years of sweat and sacrifice, and I will not hand it over like a party favor. My mother started to speak, but I held up a hand. You all think I'm selfish? Fine, call me selfish. But don't you dare call what Chloe has done honest. She lied to Ethan. She lied to all of you. And she tried to manipulate me through public pressure and guilt. That isn't love. That isn't family. Chloe's cheeks burned, her mouth twitching between anger and embarrassment. Grandpa shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing at the others, unsure of what to say. I looked around the room one last time. I love this family, but I'm done shrinking myself to keep the peace. If you want to cut me off for protecting what's mine, so be it. I won't be bullied into submission, not by Chloe, not by Mom or Dad, not by anyone. Then I picked up my purse and walked toward the door. As I reached it, my cousin Tessa stood up and followed. I'm proud of you, she whispered, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. About time, someone said it. I didn't cry until I got home, not from regret, but from relief. For the first time in my life, I'd stood firm. I'd said no, and I meant it. Whatever fallout came next, I was ready. Because no matter what they said, this house, this life, this strength, it was mine, and I wasn't giving it away. But this ends now. I looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes in turn. My house represents years of sacrifice and hard work. It's not just a building, it's a symbol of my independence and self-worth. The room fell completely silent, the weight of my words sinking in. The fact that none of you can understand or respect that says more about you than it does about me. My mother opened her mouth, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Rachel, I held up a hand. I'm not finished. I took a steadying breath, my voice unwavering. I love this family. I always have. But love shouldn't require me to shrink myself or give up the things I've worked so hard for. If you can't accept my boundaries, that's your decision. But I won't be attending a wedding where the bride has lied about me and where my own family tried to guilt me into surrendering the only home I've ever truly made for myself. The silence was stifling. Then my father spoke, his tone sharp and cold. If that's your final word, then perhaps it's best. But that night, I felt proud of the woman I'd become, the life I'd protected. I deliberately avoided Instagram, knowing it would be flooded with carefully filtered photos of Chloe's big day. It wasn't until I returned to the B&B that night, wrapped in a cozy knit throw, that curiosity got the better of me. I scrolled briefly. Chloe in her couture lace gown, my parents flanking her, Ethan standing beside her with a smile that looked more polite than joyful. I put my phone away and exhaled. Whatever came next wasn't mine to control. The week that followed was quieter than expected. The texts stopped. The voicemails, too. It was as if my absence had drawn a line no one wanted to cross just yet. Then, a few days later, Jamie showed up at my porch in Petaluma, holding 2 iced coffees. Mind if I sit? He asked. We swayed gently on the porch swing. I thought everyone hated me, I admitted. Jamie scoffed. Please. Aunt Carol said it was about time someone stopped the Chloe show. And Uncle Bob? He told my dad that you've always been the adult in the family, just too polite to demand recognition. That quiet acknowledgement, from people who'd never openly sided with me, meant more than I could say. 3 weeks after the wedding, my dad texted, "Would you be open to meeting for coffee?" We met at a small cafe halfway between Santa Rosa and Petaluma. He looked older, maybe more tired than I remembered. I've been thinking about what you said, he began quietly, staring into his mug. About always having to step aside for Chloe. I nodded, waiting. There might be some truth to that, he admitted. Your mom and I think we expected different things from our girls. And maybe that wasn't fair to you. Chloe always seemed to need more help, more guidance, my father admitted. You were so self-sufficient from an early age. That doesn't mean I didn't need support too, I said softly. Or recognition for my accomplishments. He looked down at his cup of coffee, nodding slowly. I'm beginning to see that. I can't promise things will change overnight, but I want to try to understand your perspective better. It wasn't a full apology, but it was more than I'd expected. We agreed to meet again the following week, just the 2 of us, an effort to build a new kind of father-daughter relationship, one that acknowledged my boundaries, not just his expectations. My mother, however, was slower to come around. Still fiercely protective of Chloe and bitter over what she called my grandstanding, she kept her distance. Through the family grapevine, I heard that Chloe and Ethan had returned early from their would-be 2-week honeymoon in Kauai after a series of arguments. They were now living temporarily at Ethan's townhouse, while trying and failing to find common ground in their house hunt. Apparently, their vastly different spending habits and long-term goals were causing more friction than either of them anticipated. It was almost 3 months after the wedding when Chloe showed up at my door on a gray Sunday afternoon. She looked different. No full glam makeup, just tinted moisturizer and a messy ponytail. Her usual designer bag was replaced with a canvas tote. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice more uncertain than I'd ever heard it. We sat in my living room, the one she'd once envisioned turning into her dream nursery, and the silence between us stretched long. Finally, she said, "Ethan and I are not in a great place. He's talking about an annulment." I didn't say I told you so. I just listened. "Part of it's the house thing," she admitted, eyes fixed on the hardwood floor I'd sanded myself. "He says he can't trust me because I lied. And maybe I did get a little carried away thinking we'd live here." It wasn't a sweeping apology, but for Chloe, it was monumental. "I might have been wrong," she added. "Not about everything, but about the house. I shouldn't have announced anything without asking you. Thank you for saying that, I said honestly. It means a lot. We talked for an hour. No tears, no dramatic hug, just an honest conversation, tiptoeing over past wounds and landing cautiously on common ground. As she stood to leave, Chloe paused in the doorway. Your house really is beautiful, Rachel. You did a good job with it. Simple words, but for the first time, they felt real. In the months that followed, I began redefining family. I poured into friendships that nourished me. Jenny and I started hosting Sunday dinners, rotating between homes, building something deeper, our own version of family. One with love, respect, and no strings attached. I received a significant promotion at work, a validating moment after months of channeling my energy into professional growth while navigating personal upheaval. The recognition felt earned, not handed to me, and it reminded me how far I'd come. Around the same time, I started dating someone I met at a regional architecture conference in Santa Rosa. His name is Marcus, a landscape designer with a calming presence and a sense of humor as dry as Sonoma wine. Our relationship was grounded in mutual respect and transparent communication, which felt like a complete reversal from the manipulation I had grown too used to. I also began reclaiming my home in quiet but meaningful ways. I repainted the guest room, the one Chloe had once casually called the nursery, in a rich shade of teal I adored but knew she would have loathed. I rearranged the living room to reflect my own tastes and daily rhythm, no longer imagining how I'd host family members who had never truly respected the space. In the backyard, I planted rows of salvia and lavender, confident they'd return every spring, just like my resolve had. 6 months after the bridal shower spectacle, I hosted a small dinner party, my own kind of celebration. Gathered around the long oak table were Jenny, some of my closest colleagues, 2 cousins who had quietly supported me, and a neighbor who had become like family. We passed dishes, refilled glasses, and shared stories late into the night. At one point, Jenny lifted her wine and offered a toast. To Rachel, who showed us all that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's brave, I smiled, the kind that came from deep contentment, and raised my glass in return. Later, as we watched the sunset from the porch, its orange light spilling over the hills of Sonoma, Jenny turned to me. Looking back, would you have done anything differently? I thought about it. I wish I'd set boundaries years ago. Maybe then things wouldn't have built up to the point where I had to make such a public stand. But I don't regret it. The biggest lesson hadn't been about ownership or even family loyalty. It had been about rediscovering my own voice. For so long, I had accepted the role others handed me, the quiet one, the helper, the responsible older sister. But those labels came with expectations that silenced who I really was. That night, as laughter drifted through my home and candles flickered against the darkened windows, I realized something. I hadn't just stood up for my house. I had finally stood up for myself. And that made all the difference. If you've made it this far, thank you for hearing my story and holding space for everything I went through. I'd love to know your thoughts. Have you ever had to stand up to your own family to protect what you work so hard for? Drop a comment below. I read every single one. Your advice, encouragement, or even a simple, "I see you, Rachel," means more than you can imagine. Please hit that like button if you believe setting boundaries is an act of self-respect, not selfishness. And subscribe if you want to hear more stories like mine, real-life battles where people reclaim their voice, their space, and their peace. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to protect what's yours, even if it disappoints others. Love doesn't mean surrendering your self-worth. Family doesn't mean forfeiting your future. Learn to trust your gut, speak your truth, and build a life that feels like yours, not one molded by guilt or pressure. You are not alone, and you are not wrong for choosing yourself. Let's keep this conversation going. Tell me, what would you have done in my shoes?